Hello and welcome to the Red Jacket Club. My name is Andy. I'm here with Brendan, and this is where we talk Cardinals baseball. We're here today to talk about MLB Network and the list that they put out last week. They gave a little bit of favor to our first baseman, Paul Goldschmidt, but then we feel like they slighted our third baseman, Nolan Arenado. So we're going to talk about it today. But before we get into that, Brendan, I just kind of want to see how you're feeling. What's on your mind as we get closer and closer to the beginning of the season?
Doing really well. I just got back from Florida, as you know. Um, what else? I got a new webcam, which we're keeping our fingers crossed. I mean, the quality is great, but we'll see if it lags at all. Hopefully, if anyone is watching on YouTube, that it doesn't look too bad. Other than that, I'm feeling good. I'm happy to talk Cardinals baseball and defend Arenado a little bit.
Yes, yeah, he definitely deserves some defending, especially after what they did to him and the things that they said about other players that were around him. It's just kind of is very weird. I guess we'll just get right into it. So if you hadn't seen it, every year I'm sure MLB Network goes through the players that are currently in the league, and they talk about the years before, even 10 or 5, 7 years in the past, and discuss the I guess, order that they would put these players in terms of their value or most valuable. They're just ranking these players based off of their thoughts and their knowledge of baseball. Well, their MLB Network, you would think that they'd have a great knowledge of baseball, but this list just seems weird. And I can just read it off for you here. It's number one, Manny Machado. We'll talk about it, but you can't really argue with that one. Jose Ramirez, Austin Riley, Rafael Devers, then Nolan Arenado at the 5 spot, Alex Bregman, Justin Turner, Max Muncy, Yandy Diaz, and DJ LeMahieu all made the list for top third basemen going into the 2023 season. And the first thing that caught my eye on this list were the three players closer to the bottom, but just like really confused me why Justin Turner, Max Muncy, and DJ LeMahieu were on the list. I guess Brendan, before we go like deeper into it, what were your first initial thoughts when you saw the graphic that MLB Network put out on this?
Well, Cardinals Twitter started blowing up and started throwing out the clip of Arenado as number 5, and I definitely thought I was, reading it wrong at first because it just doesn't make sense. And coming from the objective stats that we did dig up, I mean, it still doesn't make sense to me. I thought I'd dig into it more and be like, okay, I can see that, but the first thought that came to mind was like, what metrics are they actually using for the list? And you said you checked out those clips, and it sounds like they use all kinds of different metrics. So the good thing is today we're gonna get into the pretty much the real metrics that will be that should be taken into account, but I guess weren't.
Yeah, they really were all over the place, and we will talk about that. The first thing that I wanted to mention, and like I said, when it came to those three players, Justin Turner, Max Muncy, and DJ LeMahieu. When I think of the Yankees and who's playing third base, I don't even think of DJ LeMahieu.
No.
I think of Josh Donaldson because
Yep.
he's their third baseman. And then when it comes to Justin Turner and Max Muncy,
Max
they're on the
Muncy,
same
dude.
they're on the same team. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
how can one be? I guess they could both be very good third basemen, but like if they're platooning time, then that usually doesn't mean that they are the best of third basemen. But then I do think Max Muncy over Turner because Turner's been DHing more. But really, when you look at it all together, Muncy didn't play. He didn't have as many appearances as some of these guys who didn't make the list at all. To go, I guess, on those three players, Justin Turner had 66 appearances at third base. Max Muncy had 84, so obviously more, but not a whole lot. And LeMahieu only had 47 appearances at third base in 2022. So when you're talking about these other guys who are at the top of the list, you have Austin Riley at 159, Jose Ramirez at 127, and then Manny Machado at 135. I mean, these guys are playing every day at this position. So I just like that was the first thing that hit my brain. I was like, wait a second, those guys don't even like play third. So how are they on the list? I mean, you have guys who didn't make the list in Matt Chapman, Josh Donaldson, again, the Yankees' third baseman, and Eugenio Suarez, who all had over 100 appearances at third base last season that easily could have made this list. So that was just crazy to me. That was the initial list that they posted, was just
Yeah,
very weird.
yeah. The three people that really stand out to me that didn't make the list, just at first glance, is Matt Chapman, Ryan McMahon, and Eugenio Suarez. Those guys, I just immediately think third baseman. And yeah, DJ LeMahieu. I mean, they need to add some kind of utility ranking or something, because like, sure, he can play the position, but I mean, I thought the whole point would be to, the best third baseman, the top 10 third baseman. And I mean, even Ke'Bryan Hayes, he's out there all
Hmm.
the time. It's like, you would think they would have added,
Third
guys,
baseman.
guys that are out there every single day. And that's not what they did.
Right. And so the other thing that was glaring was the fact that our third baseman Nolan Arenado got shoved into the five spot, based on all the other metrics that they kind of hodgepodge together. They were saying some of these other guys were better, um, and it just didn't make sense because I mean Devers very good player. Defensively, though, I don't see him in the same caliber as Nolan Arenado. Same with Austin Riley. Like they're both very good and very great offensive power bats, but like they don't match up really in my mind. J
Mm,
Ram, Manny Machado, and Nolan Arenado are probably the top three. Like when you talk about third baseman in this league, that's probably who you're going to mention at this point in time,
mm,
as your top three. But and we can go into this a little bit more when we go down. I kind of want to talk about defensive metrics first. That was the first thing that came to mind because obviously we see it every day. We see Nolan just trying crazy things. Sometimes they don't work, but like he has the ability to make crazy plays. So he does what he does, and he makes them more often than not. And I was like, okay, so if we're talking about a third baseman, you have to play both sides of the ball, and you have to play him well. Well, when you look at this list, some of the guys that are in front of Nolan are not even close to Nolan, in terms of what I looked at was outs above average. It's a cumulative effect of all individual plays a fielder has been credited or debited, with making it a ranged base metric. So it takes into consideration like how far, and like when you think of Nolan Arenado, you think of him running all over the place and somehow gloving the ball and then also somehow throwing it to Paul Goldschmidt. But it takes into the range-based metrics of fielding skill that accounts for a number of plays made and the difficulty of them. So, like I said, they take into account how far a player goes to get the ball, how much time he has to get there, how far from the base runner is how far away the base runner is, and all those different like crazy things that you see in a Nolan Arenado highlight, is all taken into consideration when it comes to outs above average.
right.
And the four people in front of him, Machado, Ramirez, Riley, and Devers, don't even come close to the 14 outs above average that Nolan Arenado had. And really, the only person who had better metrics than him was that person that you mentioned, Ke'Bryan Hayes, who didn't even make
Didn't
the
even make top
list.
10.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, sticking with defense here, it's obviously a super important stat. When you're talking about third baseman, I mean, are we talking about someone who's going to be a DH one day, or are we talking about true third baseman? And I like that we both kind of chose different stats to look into, because as you pointed out, the outs above average Arenado is way up there, above the four players in front of him, but he's also better at defensive runs saved by a lot. So first one above him, Devers, he's got Well, first off, Arenado has 19 defensive runs saved, and that metric is pretty easy to explain. I mean, just it's the runs that he saved. So he had 19 on the season. Um, Devers had -6 DRS. Austin Riley had 6 DRS. Jose Ramirez got a little bit closer at 10 DRS. And then Machado, he ends up at 6 DRS, tied with Riley. So, it's really not close. I mean, 19 runs is really a lot. I mean, that can save many games. That I don't know. What do you think? You think that can put a team, up in the standings, in my opinion. 19 runs.
Yeah, oh yeah. And then you think about the other thing. So, you brought up that Austin Riley had 6 defensive runs saved, which is good. That means that he's making plays that are it's not easy to play third base. I play third base in a men's league and it sucks. And so I can't imagine having 110 hitting right at your head.
Oh yeah.
It's got to be a whole different level. But at the same time, his OAA, his outs above average, is -6. So
Hmm.
he is not making plays that are ranged base, that are either far in front of him, to his right or left, and he's not going back on the ball, which we've seen Nolan Arenado be able to do. He catch baseballs over his head, Willie Mays style, running into the it's not the tarp over there, but it's the just the netting and everything on
Yep.
his side of the warning track. So it's very weird that like he just wasn't even considered as the elite athlete that he is. And obviously, he's not looking at this list or taking it personally. But us who watch him every day kind of take it personally when people who aren't as proficient at his skill level are being considered better than him.
Hmm.
And when it comes to being a third baseman, that defense is everything because that ball is coming at you faster than it would if you're playing the middle infield. So still coming at you fast, but like they call it the hot corner for a reason. So
Yep.
um, I guess I don't know what other 2 cents I want to put on this. I know that there are other players on here. Like I said, we brought up Josh Donaldson, Ryan McMahon. They both Josh Donaldson has 6 outs above average. So again, better than Austin Riley, better than Jose Ramirez, better than Devers. And same with Ryan McMahon. Apparently, Colorado tried to fill in a good fielding short or good fielding third baseman with another good fielding third baseman because he had 9 outs above average. So um, yeah, it's just it's weird to see a network for MLB kind of miss the whole defensive part of the list.
Yeah, that I think our point has pretty much been made on the defensive side. He's Arenado is clearly better than these top four guys that are in front of him. So now I think we can kind of go into each individual player and see where he stacks up against these players offensively. So I'll just dive right into what Arenado looked like this season offensively, and I think we all kind of know. But he just a reminder, he did slash 293, 358, 533 for a 891 OPS. And then I just kind of pulled a few stats, and I know some people don't like RBI, but I did home runs and RBI to kind of look at. I didn't dive too deep. I know you have some of the advanced metrics, which you can get into, but just comparing those to Devers slash 295, 358, and 521, which is almost identical, but that comes out to a 879 OPS. So Arenado has him by 20 points or a little more than 10. 27 home runs compared to Arenado's 30, 88 RBI compared to Arenado's 103. So I don't know what your advanced stats say, but they're super close, and I love Devers as a player. He got a great contract this offseason, but I mean, Arenado had a better season. What do you
Hmm.
think?
Yeah, and like you said to preface, like none of this is a slight on any of the players that are in this list. It's more of a
Right.
slight on MLB Network just blindsidingly missing the whole idea of their top 10 hashtag top 10 right now that they're putting out. What I looked at was weighted runs created plus, which is a metric that takes in the statistics of runs created and adjusts that number to account for important factors like ballpark and ERA. And the the numbers still shake out to the point where Arenado should be likely at 2 or 1 on this list. But then again, when you're wrapping in those defensive metrics, he likely should be the number 1 third baseman, according to MLB Network. Just to go through the top 5 here, because that's where Nolan shakes out. Manny Machado had a weighted runs created plus of 152, which means if 100 is the league average, Machado was 52% better than league average in runs created. And then it's adjusted for those ballpark factors and other weighted information. So I looked at that, and then I just looked at home runs because I know that home runs are big in the game right now, and that was just the only other stat that I really was interested in looking in. So Machado had 152 WRC plus with 32 home runs. Jose Ramirez had 139 WRC plus with 29 home runs. Austin Riley was 142 and 38. Rafael Devers was 141 and 27. And then Nolan Arenado is 151 and 30. So when you're looking at these guys, obviously Austin Riley had a great year in terms of his power. He had 38 home runs. But he's still not creating enough runs in all ballparks than Nolan Arenado. The only person that is on this list is Manny Machado, and that's because Machado is a very good hitter. But at the same time, if you're wrapping in everything, weighted runs created plus, outs above average, home runs, Nolan Arenado should be at the top of this list, just hands down.
So, yeah, we can definitely agree he's above Devers. Um, and you say he should be at the top of your list. I'll go ahead and just keep comparing these these stats from last season. I'll just go up the list if that's cool with you.
Go right ahead.
Does that work? All right.
Yeah.
So we agree he jumps Devers, and you said he had him on WRC plus. He had him on home runs, which are some of the stats you like to look at. I'm curious to see what your argument against Austin Riley is, because Austin Riley had 38 home runs against Arenado's 30, which can be significant. Austin Riley had an 878 OPS compared to Arenado's 891. But then again, we bring it right back to the defensive metrics. Since they are very similar offensively, I think Arenado has the advantage over Riley. But what do you think? You like the home run metric, and I do too. But who has that advantage, would you say?
I still think it's Arenado because he's creating runs other than the home run. He's creating runs with the double, or he's creating runs with just seeing eye singles. Like he's again the weighted runs created plus is trying to adjust across all ballparks, make it a league average of 100, and he's clearly better than Riley. Obviously, Riley has the power. He's a very good hitter, but at the same time, in those key situations where runs need to be created, Arenado's just getting the job done before Riley is.
I agree. And then also, I mean, we take a old school metric at batting average, but man, 20 years ago, you take a 273 batting average versus a 293. I mean, that 20-point difference 20
Hmm.
years ago could be the difference of a MVP.
Right.
And I mean, it really does matter. It's not like a completely useless stat. I mean, Arenado is hitting more base hits consistently, and for that, I mean, he definitely should be above Riley. So I think we both agree he should be above him. Um, and I mean, we can go into Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez slash 280, 355, 5 with a 514 slug for a 869 OPS. He had 29 home runs. He does have Arenado and RBI at 126, so he did carry the team. However, we just go back to that OPS, and Arenado has him by 20 points. So I think Jose Ramirez is a lot better than some of the other candidates up here, so I like him in that 3 spot, especially because he is good defensively as well. He came in right behind Arenado in defensive runs saved, but I still give that advantage to Arenado when it comes to just these stats from last season.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, it's still just all around. If you're thinking about best third baseman, um, unfortunately, that they don't compare. Again, talking about weighted runs created plus, Nolan Arenado was at 151 and Jose Ramirez was at 139. Arenado also had one more home run than he did. So, I mean, obviously home runs aren't everything, but creating runs is kind of everything when it comes to being a good hitter, especially in the role that a third baseman usually plays, as the cleanup spot or somebody who's supposed to be creating runs. Nolan Arenado just does it more than most of this list. The only person who he doesn't make it more of than is Manny Machado. So yeah,
So
I
what
think
was
Nolan's hopping all of these guys that are in front of him, except for maybe Machado.
what was Machado's WRC plus?
152 to Nolan's
And
151. They're like right next to
so
each other.
and exactly they're so
They have
close
been
to
their
each
whole
other.
career.
Yeah, they're so close to each other in every single stat that then I don't really know a bunch about WAR, but Machado has a 6.8 WAR compared to Arenado's 7.9,
Hmm.
and a whole point of WAR is pretty significant, I would say. And you just take Arenado's defense, and I don't know, man. I really like Arenado over Machado too, and that might sound crazy to say, but like I just think he had a better season. From a very objective standpoint, I just would take Arenado over all these guys. And once again,
Hmm.
we all love these guys. We love Machado. We love Ramirez. We love them all. But I mean, how could you not take Arenado over some of these guys?
Right. And we talked about it a little bit. I can reference some of the things that were said by MLB Network in the clips that they put on Twitter, because apparently they don't want to put it on YouTube. Maybe they're embarrassed to do so. But they put about 30 seconds of each clip on YouTube. They showed for Arenado, they brought up WAR for 2022, and they said the only person who had a better WAR than Arenado was Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge had like a 10 point something WAR, which is insane, but that's because he had a career season. But like you said, Nolan's was like at 7.8 or something like that, and none of these other third basemen were even close to him.
Uh,
Um, Devers was number one in ex-WOBA over the last two seasons. So, okay.
you
Um,
know what that all that means is that's just one of those peripheral stats I've talked
right.
about. It's that
It's a
expected
projection.
weighted, yeah,
Right. And you can't grade or rank third baseman off of what they were expected to do. You have to do it off of what they did.
right.
So I kind of threw that one out of the rotation. Austin Riley, he was number one in WRC plus um, since 2021. Okay. I guess that's like accounting the last two seasons.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, he didn't have better WRC plus than some of these players on this list, including Nolan Arenado. Um, and then since 2017, Jose Ramirez was fifth in WAR, and then they put an annotation saying just behind Nolan Arenado.
It's
um,
so
as part of
weird.
why they ranked him higher than Nolan Arenado. So like the whole point of this was to kind of just have a struggle session as to what was MLB thinking. Like when we've laid out everything for you in this video of saying like we're obviously biased. We have the Cardinals emblems on our hats, but like what is going on with saying these are the top ranked third basemen when you look at the objective stats, not even just over the last year, but over the last couple of years, um, and you obviously see that Nolan's at the top. I mean, there's a reason why these third basemen in the National League haven't gotten a Gold Glove since Nolan hit the league, because Nolan's in the league. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it just, I don't know. I can't wrap my head around what MLB Network was thinking and why they thought that this was a good idea to broadcast. Because there were a lot of Toronto fans that were upset that Chapman didn't even make the
Make the
list.
list. Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, it's super weird, man. There's another point I wanted to make. I really think they just didn't factor in defense. I mean, how
Oh,
could he be number
everything that they were
five?
saying was basically offensive metrics. They hardly brought up defensive run saves. They did it a couple of times, but when it came to some of these guys, especially like Yandy Diaz, they didn't even want to bring up his defensive metrics
Yeah,
because
so
when you,
how can you make a ranking of third baseman
I don't
instead of
know.
just calling it third baseman, just be like hitters that play third base?
Yeah,
You
right,
know, it's like
right, yeah, yeah. I think Yandy Diaz's defensive run saves was, I didn't put it on here, but I remember it being atrocious. I thought it was like -14 or something like that. But his outs above average is -8, so he's not making any plays that help his team.
yeah.
And though Matt Chapman didn't make the list, I mean, he still at least had a positive, or not WRC plus, a positive outs above average. So like, you would think that with his offensive metrics lining up at 117, 27 home runs, like in a positive OAA, you could throw him on the list lower, but like, he's still a better third baseman and more of a third baseman than than frickin' Justin Turner at this point, or
Yeah.
Max Muncy. The only reason why I think Key Brian Hayes was not on this list was because they were looking at offensive metrics. And if you look at his WRC plus, he's got an 88. And I think his OPS plus was like 89. Um, and then he only has 7 home runs, which he is a kind of a smaller guy. I know he doesn't have a lot of power to him, but at the same time, he's just not as much of an offensive threat as some of these other guys.
Yeah, I like to bring him up, or I like to bring up my dynasty league a lot, because it's based around like what I think about these players. I drafted Key Brian Hayes. I mean, I love him as a player, but you realize he's really just a defensive player. You hope he can come into his offensive side. Who knew we'd be talking about Key Brian Hayes, but he's one of those guys that lights up the peripheral stats, the StatCast. I mean, he hits balls really hard, but just not a guy that hasn't really put it together yet at the big league level offensively. He plays a solid defense for the Pirates, but um, yeah,
Mm.
that's all I really have about third baseman. Whenever you're ready, I can get into a few things that happened around the league.
Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, the first one, just Trey Mancini signs with the Cubs. Another move. I don't have the stats pulled up right now. It's just another kind of silly type move, to be honest. I mean, what are they gonna do? I guess just put him in the DH role or Eric Hosmer platoon. I don't know.
They'll likely throw him, Hosmer, if they have another first. They'll probably platoon him
They
at
have
first, and
Patrick
then
Wisdom too, so
Wisdom's been playing third for him though.
oh
So
yeah, yeah, you're right.
they'll probably have Wisdom at third, and then Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer kind of going back and forth at first, or like I don't I s- Oz I'm struggling to speak because I just don't know what the hell they're doing over there. But
Yeah,
it seems like Hosmer could be DH, but I don't think that Mancini can be relied on for a DH. So maybe they kind of use that as Mancini at first, and then Hosmer DH. But I don't know. It just seems like they're filling in the gaps of a very big gaping hole.
yeah, yeah. No one really knows what they're doing. It's just hoping they do well and trade him at the deadline. I think playing the Pirates game, but
Yeah.
there was that guy on Twitter that thinks they're gonna win the division, which
He
has
was
to
a
be a bot.
delight. I
Yeah.
yeah, I can't I can't figure out if it was a bot or not because he did sound a little bit more sentient toward the end of the conversation. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It was interesting.
Yeah, who knows? We don't know if he was being serious or not, but I have it screenshot for later in the season, which will be good. Um, so the next big move, or the kind of the only big move that happened, was the four-player deal between the Marlins and the Twins.
Hmm.
So Luis Arraez goes to the Marlins for Pablo Lopez, and this is a big one for us because obviously Cardinals fans across Twitter have been wanting Pablo Lopez with us, and me and you have kind of said it the whole time, like we don't want to create holes other places. So I know I'm pretty happy that we didn't get him. I mean, I would love to have him on the pitching staff, but it wouldn't have made sense for him. And on the other side of the trade, of the trade is Luis Arraez, who's a very polished hitter. Kind of, I think Brendan Donovan kind of models his game after the type of hitter that Luis Arraez is. He won a Silver Slugger this last year with like a 316 batting average. So good for Miami. Bringing up my dynasty team again. It kind of sucks. I wanted Arraez on the Twins because the lineup protection with Correa, and all those guys, Jorge Polanco, Byron Buxton. But now he goes to Miami. So who knows? I think he might fall off a little bit because he doesn't have the protection, but that's my thoughts on that trade.
Yeah, I don't have many thoughts on it. I'm glad that it kind of shuts the door on everybody speculating trades, because we've kind of known for a while that the Cardinals just aren't going to make any more moves. They're making these smaller moves either through the Rule 5 draft, or they're just signing tiny contracts with players that have gone in and out of other organizations. Um, so I'm glad that it kind of shuts that door. Other than that, the most interesting thing to me out of this was that the GM of the Marlins came out with a presser saying that Jazz Chisholm, because of the Arise trade, is now moving to center field,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, I don't think he's played center field a whole lot or at all. And he said that if they don't shore up the center field position, that he was going to go out there and win a Gold Glove. So he's obviously a confident guy, and baseball isn't as easy as that may seem. But I mean, it's going to be that infield is sure interesting now, because they put Gene Segura at third base. And this was another thing that I noticed in this third base conversation, not to get too off track, but when MLB Network was talking about third baseman that they didn't include on the list, they threw Gene Segura into the mix, and he didn't play a lick of third base last season. He hasn't played third base like all of his career. But now because he's on the Marlins as a third baseman, they included him. So I don't know what MLB Network was doing, but they put him over there. They have who did they just didn't they trade? Well, they traded Miguel Rojas, but I can't remember who their shortstop's
So
going to be now. I
so
guess
they
it's Joey
have
Wendell, but Joey
so
Wendell's a third baseman.
well, yeah. So they moved Wendell to short, and then which he's like a, I guess, a second
He's
or
a
third
utility
baseman.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's playing shortstop, and now they took Luis Arraez, who's not good at second base. He's better at first base, and he's playing second base.
Hmm.
So they have a very weird infield, and I don't know, man. I don't know how it's gonna work out, but old Skip Schumacher over there is trying to make some moves. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting place that they're putting him in, and I guess if they're going to put Chisholm in the outfield, I don't know. It's the Marlins are going to be interesting this year. They obviously have the pitching to make up for the fact that their outfield's going to be just scrabbled and their infield's going to be scrabbled. So,
Yeah, it's
um,
just like looking at, I don't know, looking at an older brother or something. I don't know a good analogy for this, but yeah, sure, they're making these moves. They're feeling good coming into the season, but oh, they look over and they have three older brothers of the Phillies, the Mets, and the Braves. And
mhm.
it's like, okay, guys, in my opinion, they probably should have waited a few years before making these MLB ready type moves. Because, I mean, the windows that those other teams have are, I mean, the Marlins don't have a chance in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. So, um, I don't have any other thoughts on that. Again, I'm just glad that we're not going to be speculating a Pablo Lopez trade anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, I guess the Cardinals are set. We're just going to be sitting here waiting to see if they do anything else. Um, and then we are going to be pre-recording some thoughts on how the offseason has gone, which I guess we can talk a little bit more about how that trade fits into the mix with that conversation. But other than that, I don't think that I have anything else to say other than MLB Network kind of got my hopes up. I was or tweeting back and forth with some people in a thread that I think Cards Convo started or somebody started, and they were talking about how Cardinals don't really get national media attention, but Paul Goldschmidt kind of forced their hand, and then all of a sudden they the next day they're talking about third baseman and they just shit on the Cardinals.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I don't really have any other thoughts other than they've kind of just racked my brain for the last week trying to figure out what the hell they're thinking.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It took Cardinals Twitter by storm, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Alrighty. Well, like I said, we're going to be getting some more thoughts on the Cardinals off season coming up. We'll release that next week, but at the same time, I hope that everybody has had some time to decompress on this issue, give it a little bit of thought, and let us know what you think. You can always comment on the video or shoot us a tweet at red_jacket club. Find us on Instagram with the same handle. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. Like this video, that would be great. But other than that, I think we're all good. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining the club, and we'll see you next time.